Good afternoon. Welcome to EdSet Network. Friend, as you know, this week we have organized lecture on history of India, economic history of India. We will try to know how economic activities have evolved over the years. We will start with the ancient economic activity in ancient India and particularly the Mauryan economy. And for discussion on this very topic, we have in the studio Dr. O.P. Singh. He teaches history in Delhi College of Arts and Commerce. Have keen interest on economic aspects of the economic aspect of the life in the ancient India. So I hope his knowledge and experience will help us to understand this topic in a new perspective. So on your behalf, I welcome Dr. Singh for EduSet lecture on this very topic. Welcome you, sir.
Thank you, Amrendra ji, and good afternoon, viewers. As you have already introduced the topic, let me tell you about Mauryan economy, because whenever we talk about Mauryan period, the picture that comes to our mind is that of a big empire. Now, empire I am using here in a very loose sense of terms because the term has been questioned in the context of ancient Indian history. Nevertheless, the control over a larger portion of Indian subcontinent of the Mauryans is undoubtedly unquestioned. They enjoyed control over a very large area, and this control required the Mauryans to maintain a huge bureaucracy, a big army, and a large number of paraphernalia to look after this administration. Now, generally speaking of economic history, whenever we talk of economic history, the agrarian history becomes of paramount importance in our history. Not only because agriculture is the backbone or has been the backbone of our economy since time immemorial, but also because a large section of our population has been and still remains engaged in agricultural activities. So, importance of agriculture in Mauryan history is also very immense, that we will discuss in a short while from now in detail. Another important feature of Mauryan period is agrarian expansion, because the period witnesses agrarian expansion to a large extent, and that also shall be discussed in more detail in a while from now. Now, all this increase in agrarian expansion, growth in agrarian production could become possible because of sound technology that was available to the Mauryan people. Iron was already introduced in Indian subcontinent, especially in North India, sometimes during the first millennium BC. But the use of iron in agrarian production, though it has been a matter of historical debate, but the use in agrarian activities of iron starts on a larger scale or by the masses sometimes around 5th century, 4th century BC or so, and by the time of Mauryans we have substantial number of agrarian tools available in northern India and from the area where the control of Mauryan has been firm and direct. The point I am trying to make is that it is within the Gangetic plain that iron tool which were very necessary and they were being used. Now, Arthashastra, in fact, suggests Arthashastra has been a very important source of history. Now, the importance of Arthashastra as a source of history of Mauryan period has again been questioned, but nevertheless, to the extent it is used, Arthashastra suggests that the state should maintain a control, greater control over the mines, and here the importance of iron as mine also becomes important, because iron, which was very important technological innovation of the age, was very important in the field of agriculture. Not only because iron was easily available technology, but also because it was a technology which was suitable and in fact efficient in largely clearing the forests of Gangetic Plain, and plowing deeper in the loamy soil of Gangetic Plain, which perhaps other technology could not perform. Now, then urbanization is another feature which is associated with Mauryan period. Here I would like to quote the Greek author Arrian, who says that it is difficult to count the number of cities during Mauryan period. Now, as far as this statement is concerned, it is not supported by archaeological evidence, because archaeologically, if we look at Gangetic Plain or the area which were under direct control of the Mauryas, if you look at in those areas, we do not come across much planned cities, but nevertheless, the structural remains that we have are mostly of burnt bricks. And another important structure that we encountered during this period is evidence of ring wells. Now, those ring wells must have been used for a domestic purpose, for drinking water, or maybe also for agrarian purposes. But these two features indicate improvement in the lifestyle, and process of urbanization perhaps had picked up. Now, apart from it, we have, as we already said, an organized administration by the Mauryans, which is highlighted by both Kautilya and Megasthenes. Nevertheless, Ashokan inscriptions also speak indirectly in the sense of organized administration, and for such an organized administration in the areas which were under control of the Mauryas, it was necessary that this administration is sustained with a sound economic base, because it requires a huge bureaucracy to maintain the administration, to run the administration. It requires a large army to to safeguard the borders of this empire, and so on and so forth. So the point is that you have, since if you have, or the Mauryans had a large administrative bureaucracy, large administrative structure, economy, sound economic base was very much important for them. So let us start with the most economic aspect of ancient economy, or of the economy of the Mauryans, that was agrarian economy. And if we talk in general sense of terms of agrarian development, the process of agriculture starts, as we all know, during Neolithic period, and in Indian context it was during 5th century BC or so that iron is introduced in the process of agriculture, and this iron is gradually used by a larger number of people, and these people ultimately, when they use iron at a larger scale, were also getting the benefit, and the agrarian activities increased, dependence on agriculture also increased, so increased the surplus production, and that also led to origin of a state in various sections of the various parts of the country in the form of Mahajanpadas. And one of those Mahajanpadas, Magad, emerged as the most supreme, which was under the control of the Mauryas, and it ultimately included almost the entire country. Now, if we talk of agrarian economy during Mauryan period, what we find that agriculture was already an established activity, the most important economic activity of the people. But when we come to Mauryan period, what we find that there is a stress on new land being brought under cultivation. Now this is seen in the writings of Arthashastra, where Kautilya seems to suggest that the new area should be brought under cultivation. Now, this new area was required to be brought under cultivation because the state, which maintained a huge bureaucracy, was being paid in cash, and to pay them in cash, uh, what do you call, salary, to pay them in cash, money was required, and money state gets from revenue, and revenue during those times mainly came from agrarian taxes. So it was necessary to bring more and more area under cultivation so that the revenue collection is enhanced, and the state system is run or maintained efficiently. Now, since more and more area was required to be brought under cultivation, it also required labor, because agriculture is a labor intensive practice, it's a labor intensive activity, and for this purpose it is suggested even in the Arthashastra that Sudras should be made to be settled in new area, and they are in fact, they should be given the responsibility of bringing this new land under cultivation. For this purpose, it is also suggested that the Sudras should be given certain concessions, like they should be given cattle, they should be given seeds, agricultural implements, etc., etc., so that they could start with agriculture, and new virgin land is brought under cultivation. Apart from it, there is also a suggestion in the Arthashastra that the decaying settlements should also be repopulated. Now, for this purpose, it has been suggested that even foreigners should be brought to those areas which have been depopulated, and it should be repopulated so that agricultural practices remain in operation in those areas. Arthashastra also speaks in a particular case in terms of Janapad Nives. Now Janapad Nives seem to be new settlements. Now how this system operated, it's not clear, but Professor R.S. Sharma had suggested that it seems that most of the Gangetic plain was brought under cultivation in this manner only. So the overall argument which we are trying to build for expansion of agriculture has various forces working for it, and what we have that there is an attempt by the state to bring new area under cultivation. This new area is being brought under cultivation even by the Sudras, who were earlier manual labor, but now they are given the status of peasant. So that is an important shift. And apart from it, it is also suggested that perhaps a large number of slaves which were made captive during wars were also used to be settled in these areas, so that this new area which has not been brought under cultivation so far is brought under cultivation. Now, needless to say, because of increase in importance, the importance of a peasant in the society also increases. And here I would like to refer Megasthenes, who, while dividing the Indian society in 7 sections, places the peasant at the second place after philosophers. Now, this is very important shift as far as Indian system of social stratification is concerned, because here the Megastani system is not applicable in Indian society, and that can be because of certain misunderstanding that Megasthenes might have had about Indian society. But the way he has classified Indian society and the place he has accorded to the peasant in Indian society is important, significant in this context, which perhaps highlights the importance of the peasant in the society. He also suggests that during war, peasants were untouched. Though this doesn't seem to be possible, because had it been true, it would not have been possible that 1,50,000 people were made captive during Kalinga war. Definitely a large number of them might have consisted the peasant population. But the importance of peasant in the society cannot be neglected anyway. Now, the third question that relates to agrarian history is that of land ownership. Now, land ownership has been a question that has not been very clearly answered, or for which we have no clear evidence in our sources. Because if we look at our sources, what we find that on the one hand, it seems that it was the peasant who was the owner of the land, because he had the right to till it, he had the right to sell it, he had the right to mortgage it, he had the right to gift it also. But on the other hand, there are also equally valid arguments to suggest that it was the state which was the owner of the land, because the state could confiscate the land from the peasant, state could gift the land to somebody else, and so on and so forth. So the question of land ownership has been very confusing in the context of ancient India. The point that emerges is that state enjoyed the theoretical ownership of the land, and the peasant enjoyed the practical ownership of the land. And as long as the peasant pay revenue to the state, he was the actual owner of the land. So he could not be displaced from his land in this situation. And this applies in the context of Mauryan economy, Mauryan period as well. Now, whosoever was the owner of the land, the kind of agrarian land that we have in Mauryan period can be divided into broadly three categories. One, cultivated land that was owned by the state, and this is a very significant development, because it is for the first time in the history that state itself indulged into agricultural activities. We have no other evidence in our history to suggest that the state was indulging in economic activities like agriculture, trade, etc., etc. So a state itself was indulging in the process of agriculture, and such land is known as Sita land, or can be translated as crown land, which was owned by the state. Now the state, in fact there is an official mention in the Arthashastra called Sita Dhyaksha, who was responsible to look after the agricultural operations of that land. And it seems that probably the Sita land that was owned by the state perhaps happened to be the most fertile land, and the slaves, the people who were made captives, who were enslaved, the slave labor was probably used on this state land. Now, other areas, especially in Janapad territories, which were the areas which were not under the control of the state, the areas which were not crown land, the areas which were not Sita land, which were known as Janapad territory, agriculture was carried out by private individuals. In fact, contemporary literature and literature prior to Mauryan period refer to, like Jatakas, they refer to Gahapatis and Grama Bhojakas. It seems that they were land owning people who got their land cultivated with the help of paid laborer, and they were land owning class of the society. So this was another category of land that was under cultivation during Mauryan period. A third category can be said to be that of that land which was cultivated by the sharecroppers, because perhaps it was state land, maybe individuals also they gave their land to sharecroppers, and the sharecroppers cultivated them, but the land belonged to the state or the individual. So these are basically three categories of land which were under uh, cultivation during Mauryan period. Now, for cultivation, irrigation is very important, and Indian agriculture, again, since from time immemorial, has been rain dependent. Mauryan agriculture was also rain dependent, but it seems that especially in the Sita land, the state provided some irrigational facilities, because we have Arthashastra which says that there were certain officials who were employed to measure the land for construction of sluices and channels for irrigational purposes. So it seems that state provided irrigation facility, and most of this irrigation facility was provided in Sita land, that perhaps also may be a region for better productivity on Sita land. It perhaps also seems that the better technology was used by the state in Sita land only. Perhaps masses did not have access to better technology, and Sita land produced uh, Sita land produced better quality of grains, and the productivity of Sita land was also very high as compared to the individual land. Now, irrigation facility in the Sita land, that was state owned land, did not yield any money, but if the irrigation facility was provided to the individual peasants, then a levy or a cess or a tax was imposed as irrigation cess, and it perhaps was 1/5 of the produce. But then it is interesting to see that it was imposed only in those areas where state provided irrigational facility, and not in all the areas. One of important examples of irrigation facility provided by the state is Sudarshan Tadag, which is near Girnar in Gujarat. In fact, this Tadag or reservoir was built by Pushyagupta, who was one of the governors of Chandragupta Maurya, by building a dam in this area, and this reservoir has been in operation, it has been in use till about 5th century AD, that is after about 800 years after its construction. So the importance of irrigation facility provided by the state is a very significant feature of Mauryan agrarian economy. Since agriculture, apart from providing the sustenance of the people, and it provide apart from providing the basic requirement of the people, it also provides the tax which is very much necessary for maintenance of a state, and tax was collected by the state as land revenue tax. Now, two important taxes that we have been seeing in ancient India are Bali and Bhag. Bali, during when it was started during Vedic period, Rig Vedic period, in fact it was a voluntary offering, but gradually it turned into compulsory from voluntary offering, and it took the form of a regular tax. So, Bhag was a share of the state in the agrarian produce, and this share, when the tax started, it was 1/6 of the produce, so it was also known as Sadbhag. But when we come down to later period in history, when the nature of Bali changed, it seems, and as it is suggested by Romila Thapar, that Bali, of these two taxes, Bali was a tax that was imposed on the measurement of the land, while Bhag was a tax that was imposed on the produce. And Bhag, since Bhag consisted a larger portion of tax, it was very important for the state, and state in fact um, tried to collect these taxes with all its authority. It is very interesting to see in the Lumbini edict of Asoka that when Asoka went to visit Lumbini, the birthplace of Lord Buddha, he exempted the people of Lumbini from Bali. The term that is used is Udbalike, that is, they were not required to pay Bali any longer. But even his love for Buddhism and king of the stature of Asoka could not abolish Bhag completely. They were required to pay Bhag, of course, on a reduced rate. That is, he reduced the Bhag, another important tax, to 1/8 of the produce. So, generally, as I have already said, that Bhag was also known as Sadbhag because it was 1/6 of the produce. And here, in the case of Lumbini, Asoka brought it to 1/8. But generally speaking, Bhag was 1/4 of the produce in Mauryan period. It was not 1/6, it was 1/4 of the produce. It was in fact slightly higher in the case of Mauryas. Now, as far as sharecroppers are concerned, they were provided oxen, seed, implements, etc., by the state, and such sharecroppers were required to give half of their produce to the state or to the individual for whom they were sharecropping. Now, these are the basic taxes which were imposed by the state. But these taxes, in fact, were supplemented by a number of other customary dues. Some of them were old customary dues, some of them were introduced by the Mauryas, and they were in fact, there were a large number of dues and taxes which were paid over and above the Bali and Bhag. These taxes can be enumerated as Pindakara, which was in fact paid by the husbandman, and it was assessed on group of villages. All the husbandmen had to pay a particular tax called Pindakara, and it was assessed on group of villages. Then Sena Bhakt was another tax. It was a tax which required the people to supply provision to the royal army passing through their villages. It was responsibility of the people of the village through which the royal army passed to supply the provisions and daily requirements of the army, which was known as Senavak. So needless to say, it was not a regular tax. Whenever the army passed through their area, they had to uh, pay it, or they had to provide the provisions. Now another tax is called Hiranya. Now the exact nature of Hiranya is not known, but probably it seems that it was a tax that was paid in cash, because Hiranya literally means gold. And apart from it, Kautilya has suggested that in times of emergency, when the state falls short of revenue, when the state falls short of money, the state has the authority to impose additional tax over the people. Now, the tax has been called pranay, which literally means gift of affection, but it was imposed only when the state fell short of revenue, and it amounted to one third to one fourth of the produce. Then, in the times of emergency, there was also a provision that the peasants will grow double crop, because if the crop is doubled, share of revenue, share of state will also double, and the state will get a larger revenue in this case. So, these agricultural practices and these agricultural features that we find, that on the one hand, the state is taking steps to improve agriculture, to expand agriculture, to bring more and more areas under cultivation, even by giving this responsibility to a class which was so far agri not a class of agriculturists, that is Sudra, who were manual labor. But on the other hand, we also find that state is trying to extract as much as possible from the peasant, because if all these taxes which have been enumerated in the literature and other sources were actually realized, then the peasant would have been left hardly with anything to survive upon, because in such a situation it will lead to impoverishment of the peasant. Now, another important feature of economy of Mauryan period is trade. Now, as far as the beginning of trade is concerned, its foundation were already prepared during earlier times, in pre-Mauryan times, because in Jataka stories again we have frequent reference of Karma traders who were who visited different parts of the country. The region that led to growth of trade during this period, apart from solid foundation of previous period, are political integration of the entire country, because if the country is if the entire country is under the control of one administration, of one authority, there will be no multiple authorities, and so the taxes will be less and number of taxes will be less, they will be more reasonable. There will be, because the trader will have to pay taxes only at 2 points, at the point of sale and at the point of purchase. So political and administrative unity, along with the provision of security by the Mauryan state, in fact helped flourish the trade during Mauryan period. Now, not only this, uh, the Mauryan also had a wide network of trade routes in the form of Uttarapath, which connected different cities and parts of the country from each other, and Dakshinapath, which connected different cities of the region beyond Vindhyas with each other. And this network of trade ultimately helped This network of routes, in fact, this network of routes ultimately helped in the development of trade during Mauryan period. Now, as far as organization of this trade is concerned, it was mostly organized along guild lines or sreni lines. Srenis or guilds are in fact very cohesive organization which, apart from providing security of trade to its member, facilitated the collection of tax on the part of the state as well, because it was a group of members, it was a group of members of people, it was group of members which what you call, it was a group which consisted of people indulging in a particular trade. Suppose there are some people in a city who practice pottery making, who are indulge in pottery making, they make a group called a guild, Sreni in this case, and they, some of the members take one responsibility, some other take another responsibility. For example, some take the responsibility of procuring raw materials, some take responsibility of manufacturing those potteries, making those potteries, and some will take the responsibility of marketing and sale. So in such a situation, it, of course, the share of profit of each individual decreases, but it is necessary because it provided security to the members, because in case of loss, if an individual suffers loss, then he will be devastated, but here the loss will also be shared just as the profit is shared. Since they acted in a group, it was beneficial for the state also, because the state could collect the tax from these people at one place, and they in fact were responsible for paying their taxes. So Srenis have been a very important part of artisanal activities during Mauryan period. So we have Srenis, we have number of Srenis, and in fact if we try to compare the Srenis of Mauryan period with the Srenis of pre-Mauryan period, there is an increase in the number of Srenis on the one hand, but there is also an increase in the number of artisanal groups, because the groups that earlier existed in different artisanal activities, they have increased to a great extent. The number, not only the number of groups, but also the number of activities in which they were involved have also increased. The well-known guilds, if we talk of guilds of Mauryan period, the well-known guilds were those of metallurgists, carpenters, potters, leather workers, then there were painters, then were textile workers. So all types of activities attracted guild activities around them, and people in fact generally prefer to uh, become a member of the guilds for the reason of financial security. Now, in fact, like artisans, just as artisans were organized into various guilds or sreni, we have also references that a number of merchant groups were also involved in guild activities, because we have karma traders which acted as a guild, we have traders in cloths who acted in guild, we have traders in jewelry who also acted in guild, and so on and so forth. And another important feature, because these are the efforts of the individuals who formed various guilds and organized the trade activities. But just as we have seen that the Mauryas were involved in agricultural practices. The state itself, not the Maurya, the state itself was involved in agricultural activities. Similarly, the state was also involved in the organization of trade. And for this purpose, the state directly employed artisans like armors and shipbuilders, because there were certain activities which were the monopoly of the state. The shipbuilding, it was not to be practiced by any individual artisan or any individual trader. Armory, it was also run by the state only. So in such areas which were the monopoly of the state itself employed artisans. Of course, they were paid and some of them were exempted from tax as well, because they worked for the state. The state was a very important player in the field of trade activities. And it seems that apart from indulging in trade, the state in fact played a very important role in the organization and development of trade activities, because organization of trade and commodity production in fact seem to be a part and parcel of the state policy, because we have one official mentioned by Megasthenes, who is called Superintendent of Commerce, and there is another official mentioned in Arthashastra who is Panyadhaksha. Now these people seem to be responsible for development, because Panyadhaksh was the person who was responsible for looking after weights and measures in markets. Now these people were employed by the state naturally for better trade practices and to facilitate the trade, so that nobody is affected adversely by any malpractices on the part of the traders, and state also does not suffer any loss due to such practices. State apart from it also facilitated transport, because we have the reference of an official called Navadhyaksha, who was perhaps responsible for transportation of goods through the river route, and this was to facilitate the activities of trade only. Now, as far as tax on trade is concerned, tax and custom dues on trade is concerned, it varied from 1/5 to 1/25 of the value of goods, because it varied from area to area, and it also varied from one good to another good. Luxury good invited larger tax as compared to items of daily need, and if a thing is produced at a very distant place, then the tax on such good will also increase. Now these taxes and customs were in fact concluded by an office collected by an official called Sulkadhyaksh. Now if the economy was sound, agriculture was sound, trade activities were going on, it was bound to have its effect on the entire socio-economic scenario. And urbanism seems to be another feature which was associated with the development of this Mauryan economy. Because if we look at urban population, it seems that urban population included two major groups. One was that of artisans, merchants, and the other was that of state officials. Now, needless to say, these are the people who are not involved in agricultural production. They are involved in activities other than agriculture, and the number of cities, of course, have not been supported archaeologically, because except one place which is mentioned by Megasthenes and which is also supported archaeologically, is a site called Kumhrar in modern Patna, where we have evidence of palatial remains made of wood of Mauryan period. But apart from it, there is a basic change in the structural pattern, and this change is reflected in the use of burnt bricks and use of ring wells in a larger part of Gangetic plain, which was not earlier. So this is a feature that can be seen. Of course, it was not a development of planned city, but that can be seen in the form of urban activities. And importance of urban activities, importance of trade activities in urban areas can also be seen in the fact that when Megasthenes talks about the administration of Patliputra, he talks about 6 committees. But it is interesting to see that out of those 6 committees which were there to look after the administration of Patliputra, 4 of them were related to economic activities. So this speaks for the quantum of economic development or importance of economic activities in the administration of a city. Now this can also be generalized for other cities, or at least other major cities, because if in one city there are more economic activities taking place, other cities cannot remain unaffected by such developments, and this applies to all the cities. Another important aspect of Mauryan urban economy especially, is use of money economy, because it seems that most of the transactions were taking place in cash, and for it we have both archaeological as well as literary evidence. We have references across all the literatures in the contemporary India, but more important than that, we have a large number of punch marked coins which have been recovered from a number of sites of India, and especially in the Gangetic plain, and most of these punch marked coins are made of copper and silver. So this speaks for the importance of money economy, and it seems that money coins were in circulation and money economy was flourishing and thriving. So while concluding, we can say that it was, if we look at Mauryan economy, it seems to be a story of state control on all the economic activities, but the state did not act as an obstruction, but the state was there to facilitate the economic activities, and state was trying to gather the resources from all parts of the country wherever possible. Thank you.
Okay, as we talked about the money economy was there. So when was we first find the instances when the barter system is replaced by the money economy?
See, barter system in fact has not been replaced completely even today.
Yeah, that is true.
But introduction of money economy, as far as introduction of money economy is concerned, the archaeological evidence comes for the first time during 6th century BC. That is known as the age of the Buddha, because this is also the period when we have the so-called second urbanization.
Okay.
And this is also the period when the archaeological evidence, because in literature we have evidence since earlier, but archaeological evidence comes for the first time from 6th century BC.
Okay. So now, after having so many developed tools and so many findings. Is there any because that's why it may be second urbanization might have been termed before the Maurya, you say the Buddha period, and the first one is the Sindhu civilization.
Indus Valley
Yeah, Indus
civilization.
Valley. So, is there any link or any knowledge Mauryan people? Empire people, yeah, prior to Mauryan Empire, they were having some kind of references, some kind of knowledge about the Sindhu civilization.
There is nothing that can be directly connected to the Indus Valley civilization, at least during Mauryan period. But you see,
Because we see the pattern of development is more or less same. It emerges, and the urbanization is still going on. It's a different things.
in fact, that is a set pattern that is seen everywhere. The pattern will be similar. Now, your question about any connection between
Any
the
knowledge,
Mauryas,
yeah, any
any connection
knowledge,
between the
Mauryan
Mauryas and
and
Indus
Sindhus.
Valley people, we don't come across any archaeological or literary references, but then there are certain cultural practices which continue even today.
Yeah.
Cultural practices like use of worship of Tulsi.
Worship also, right?
We have evidence of worship of Tulsi during Indus Valley civilization, and Tulsi is worshipped even today.
Worship of Shiva.
Worship of Shiva, of course, that is little doubted, but then people
Yeah.
was
People
respected during people tree,
Yeah,
people
yeah.
leaf. It was respected probably during Indus Valley
Indus Valley
civilization. It is used even today.
So, why we don't get the other evidences, but literary is a traditional sayings or traditional things which we have, but we don't get the other evidences. What the reason? How historian look at it this? Like archaeology and others.
See,
Even in case the region is cited that the urban civilized sites were submerged, so now we have the technique to find out it.
no, that we have, but until unless we get some concrete evidence, we cannot make any statement. And in fact, one evidence is not enough. It should be corroborated. It should also be supported by other evidences.
So, is there any work is going on this line or not?
So far, in fact, I have no idea that any work of this kind is taking place.
Okay. So, because when we write the look at the history in continuity, some kind of this kind of gaps make us to think history in another way. So, how can you explain this as a historian?
See,
Because
we have a perception of looking at history in continuity, and that too in political continuity, in dynastic continuity. We have a perception that Magad, this dynasty, then this dynasty, then this dynasty, then Mauryan dynasty, the entire country is controlled by the Mauryas, and then suddenly after the decline of the Mauryas, what you find that different pockets are being controlled by different dynasties, different people, and that we tend to say that it's decline, it's a dark period.
yeah, only political lineage
So
we talk about.
that is a kind of framework in which we tend to see history. While history is not just about dynasties, about political developments, it's about history. In fact, is a process, and that also should be seen as a process, as part of history, and it should not be seen as an aberration of history.
Right. So, apart from the political lineage or say political storage, we should look at the other
Of course,
sto-
socio-cultural, economic developments
yeah.
that which are not directly related to the ruling people, which are related to masses.
Right. So, how do you see in the history these socio-economic factors have helped in the growth of leaders. A leader have growth, yeah, vice versa, we can say.
See, socio-economic factors.
Because especially the rise of Magdha, it's
Yes.
situated on the Gangetic plain. Once Sindhu that was situated on the line, bank of Sindhu
See,
region.
if you look at the history of Magad, beginning with Haryanka dynasty and Sisunak dynasty, and then coming to Nandas. Generally, what we know that ruling administration is an activity that is controlled by the Kshatriyas. If you look in the Varna
Right.
order,
Right.
in
Since
Varna system, it is generally looked after by the Kshatriyas. But then, during those days only, during the days of
Dhananand.
Mahajanpadas, the Nanda dynasty that was founded was a dynasty of the Sudras.
Okay.
Even the origin of the Mauryas and even Guptas is obscure. And an obscure origin suggests a lower caste origin. So these are the people, these are the dynasties which established themselves as one of the biggest ruling dynasties in our history, can be said to be an outcome of the socio-economic processes.
Yeah, but even after that, their origin obscure. Uh, why the ruling uh, party did not try to make it clear? Yeah, knowingly they hide the fact. Because historians of that times also, yes, chroniclers, those who chronicle the events, they might have jotted down such facts, but still we are not aware of this.
Because according to the Varna system, according to the Varna order, which clearly defines the rights and duties of every Varna, administration was the duty of a Kshatriya and not of a Shudra.
Right. So even after they come to the throne, they try to maintain this
Yes, of
system.
course, of course. And this has been happening till modern times because various leaders of modern times, even Shivaji, he belonged to a lower caste, but then he was given the status of a Kshatriya after his coronation. So either they are given the status of a higher Varna order or their origin is shown as obscure.
Okay.
It was perhaps possible during modern times when Shivaji was living in a different time, and it was probably not possible during those times when the Varna orders were more stronger, more strict, and more orthodox.
Okay. So this is a statecraft which has been
Yes,
adopted by
of
the
course.
different
Can
different
be
time
said
and
to be
yeah, different time and different rulers of the different
can
times.
be said to be.
So, well, friends, today lectures you came to know about the socio-economic pattern of the modern times, and even before that, in tomorrow lecture, we will try to know in detail the socio-economic pattern of post-modern periods. So, I thank all of you for watching the lecture, and on your behalf, I thank Dr. O.P. Singh for giving such a wonderful lecture. Thank you very much.